All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. One of the great joys I have doing this podcast, as well as writing about music on my website, is it allows me to not only write about music I already know about and love, but it exposes me to great things in music, different avenues I hadn't explored in the past, and things that really excite me in that direction. So I wanted to welcome my guests for this conversation because I was recently introduced to a tremendous scene happening in New Haven, Connecticut, specifically that really piqued my interest and really thrilled me as an attendee of what I saw. So I wanted to dive in a bit further. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome my guests, Mr. Bob Gorry, and coming back for his third appearance on my podcast, Mr. Knox Chandler. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Thanks, Joel.
And we'll probably be joined by a third participant in a few minutes who I'm sure will add some very interesting perspectives to this conversation. But specifically, I want to focus on the New Haven Improvisers Collective. In short, it's a group of musicians in New Haven or surrounding areas who do just that, improvise music. There's a collective of musicians, I think 80 plus strong at this point. And there's also workshops and various things. So I want to start with you, Bob, because you're really the engine behind this collective. And I know you've been doing this in New Haven for at least 20 years at this point. So let's start with you, and what I'm hoping you can give us is a little bit of an introduction to not only your experiences in music, but what kind of led you to get this direction started to begin with 20 years ago in New Haven, specifically for improvisational music.
Well, so I was playing music in different groups, and nothing was really going well. Have a life here, and things are going well. It's fun, but I was looking for some new experiences. I also happened to be doing a radio show, a jazz and improvised music radio show on WNHU here in New Haven. I had done that for almost 10 years at the time and gotten into a lot of this sort of music. So I was just playing with a couple of friends and said, if I did this first workshop, would you come? Would you like to try to start this thing? And I got three other people to say they would definitely be there, and got a space in the wonderful Never Ending Books on State Street in New Haven, and had the first workshop, and 8 people showed up, being like three cellos, guitar players, drummers. It was great. So that's kind of how it started. And I was very new to this sort of music, other than playing it, other than realizing that I'd been doing this my whole life. There's a lot of free improvisation, so a lot of times we're playing just improv. So that was kind of where it started, and planned these monthly workshops, and people came. And another big thing that happened the first year was I went to New York City and did a workshop with Butch Morris, who has this conduction process, which is fascinating. It's definitely something to look at in itself. And he had been doing conductions at that point for 20 years. It was his 20-year anniversary of conduction. So he was doing all of these workshops and things. And when I went to that, um, we exchanged some information after going through the workshops, and a few months later, he called up and said he wanted to do one in New Haven if I have a space in a group that could do it. So I had this great group, and there was this brand new space in town called Firehouse 12. So I got them involved, and we did this wonderful conduction, a couple of sold out shows, and Butch came down, and we got a group together, and he taught us this whole process over like 4 weeks. It was fascinating, and that kind of got the ball rolling on the whole thing. So there's kind of the intro. Where do we go from here?
And it's 20 years strong now.
That was 2005. The first workshop was in January 2005, and we did that conduction in November of 2005. So
Mm.
first year, and now we're 20 years later, and we've been playing at Firehouse once a year in kind of a showcase for different groups that come out of here. Um, every year since, except for during COVID when things were closed, but every year we've done that, and that's been a fabulous place. Another great treasure here in New Haven. Um, and we just kept the workshops going, and more people came and knew about it. And it ebbed and flowed how many people were involved, but it's especially right after COVID, it really got going strong again. It was like people were cooped up and said, "What are we going to do?" So more people came, and also Michael will come later, but they're kind of the new generation of doing improvised music in New Haven. So they kind of exist separately, but as improv brothers with the Improvisers Collective. So they have their own thing, they have their own approach, and we all play together at times too, and it's kind of been great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that really stood out for me when I saw the performance I attended at Neverending Books back in May. Knox told me about it. I came down to check it out. I was really impressed by the different ages of the participants that evening. It was really inspiring to see that. And Michael is a force of nature as a percussionist. He blew me away that evening. So it was nice to see. And what I love to see is groupings of musicians from different experiences, different age groups, different levels of expression, sort of combining their experiences and creating new things. I think obviously that is important in music. Sometimes it's increasingly difficult to find. I was telling Knox not too long ago that, I go to a lot of shows with bands I've been listening to for decades, and it's the same set list at this point, the same songs, and that's fine, but I'm kind of like, all right, I've been to this party before many, many times. So to walk into Neverending Books and see what happened that evening was very interesting. And a lot of the viewers on my podcast are musicians themselves. But I certainly get people who come in just because they find us or because of the guests and their past experiences. And, certainly I want to mention Knox, who's been on the podcast before. Knox, you've worked with Susie and the Banshees, Psychedelic Furs, Golden Palominos, host of other artists, Cyndi Lauper. So for the more casual music fan who comes into this conversation, I want to ask you a very basic, very rudimentary question to sort of help give a broader perspective here. Um, how would you describe improvisational music? What are we talking about here?
Um, it's conversation. I think it's conversation that goes past language. Um, it's almost like a spiritual conversation. I think it's happening all around us. You hear a lot of it in nature. You hear it in cities. To me, it's in a weird way, it's a form of composition. I always look at there is shape and some form of composition in things you hear in nature and in cities and uh, and I had the great pleasure of working with these Nepalese musicians when I was living in Berlin, and we didn't speak the same language, but every year we played. We did several shows a year, and it was just magical that there was this, you knew these people from just playing with them. Uh, but I guess growing up and eventually settling in Connecticut, um, the music that I was subjected to by my peers in like high school and junior high school and whatnot, um, it was very much formulaic, and the amount of improvisation was basically, free improvisation was basically found in a guitar solo
Mhm.
or um, or we might be just jamming around until we found something that could turn into a song, for instance. So my ears were sort of opened up because back in the early to mid '70s, um, there were these guys in New Haven who were real improvisers, free improvisers, and uh, like and Michael Gregory Jackson was one person, and I don't know if Oliver Lake lived in New Haven. I know he played there a lot. Abdul Wadud, I used to see him play a lot, and there are people like Jerry Hemingway, and there was who was the French horn teacher at Yale? What?
Rough.
Yeah, Willie Ruff, um, trombone French horn. So there was a scene, a little bit of a scene that as a young teenager slash teenager, I I was curious about. I stumbled into it, not really being aware of this kind of music. It certainly wasn't on the radio at that time. And back then, we were getting a lot of our music from like FM radio. They played like whole albums, and you might hear a little bit of Sun Ra now and then if you're lucky, but mostly it was geared towards folk rock kind of stuff. It was the '60s actually. Uh, so that's what got me interested in it. So from there it became um, and I went to college where I was right across the river from Creative Music Studios, where there's a lot of that going on there. And I'd drop over there and hang out and sit in on Carl Berger's classes. And I think it sort of it sort of freed me up from thinking in terms of harmony or melody or even rhythm. I think it sort of forced me into trying to find my voice, because at the end of the day, that's all you have in a conversation is your voice.
Mm.
And but how could I actually enlarge my palette? I mean, obviously, I'm pulling from some of the stuff I've learned being harmony or melodical rhythmical stuff, but more so it's like stuff that sort of was outside the world of sound, where you're being influenced by paintings or movies or poetry or something. How does it become music? And so it sort of tears down the walls. And then if you really eavesdrop on conversations, you know, interesting conversations have a lot of emotion and contrasts of emotion in them. Um, so I don't know. My career hasn't been one of what I call improvisatory music. There, I said it. It's been more mainstream rock kind of pop stuff. But I've always dipped into it since college. I've always dabbled in it, and it hasn't been until probably since I moved to Germany back in 2012 that I really decided I wanted to make it more of my daily thing than playing girls just want to have fun.
Right, right. So did you two know each other before you came back to Connecticut, or was this a connection that happened once you resettled where you are
It
now?
happened resettle here. I forget exactly when, but I think it was Joe Morris
Oh,
that introduced us. I think I went and saw Joe Morris play. That's it. I went and saw Joe Morris play at the Never Ending Bookstore, if I believe. And he was like, "Oh, you got to meet Bob. He's great. We play together. He's
yeah, I think did we play a duet that night? Was that me and Joe playing a
That's
duet?
right. That's exactly right. So you have a better memory than me. Yeah." And Joe's incredible. He's very well known in the free jazz world. He teaches at New England Conservatory, and he lives like at maybe 5 minutes down the road from me. Um, but he's never here because he's working. Uh, he's always traveling. But he turned me onto Bob, and then Bob was very, but he's very friendly, great guitar player, and Bob was like, "Oh, we should get together and play." So I went over to his house and we jammed, and it was wonderful. And then he just kept introducing me to people. He pulled me into the New Haven Improvisers Collective, and I've been doing that. Like tomorrow's one, and then of course there's a lot of guitar players that show up. So what's great for me is I bring my cello instead, and
Mm.
I and I love it. It's like the only opportunity I get to really play improvised music on the cello with a group of people, and from there it's I've sort of gone to some of the FIM, which is these Michael and Caleb and Luke's scene, which are the younger guys, and um, and then I've shot up to Hartford, where to the Real Arts Ways, where Joe Morris has a thing going on up there, and then there's also Wesleyan. I hang out at Wesleyan a bit. There it's more um, contemporary classical kind of stuff, more in the electronic area. But there's also some improvisation with that too.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, actually, it's interesting. Like some of these composers, I really get the feeling they're just improvising with their max patches that they've designed. That's what it feels like. I know it's a little more than that, but yeah, it's been a sort of a kind of a slower uh, process, because I've also was consumed for 2 years uh, with my mother, taking care of her, and wasn't able to get out as much. But in the past year and a half, I've really enjoyed taking part in some of these workshops and concerts. It's been a blast.
Let's dive into the workshops a bit because on a surface level, the phrase improv workshop is almost counterintuitive in a sense. Um, at least, my initial brain went, how do you teach improvisation? So I wanted to get into that, but I also want to welcome our third guest who's made it in, Michael Larocca. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I figure let me toss the ball to Bob first with that question, and then I'll kind of go around because I suspect the answers might be slightly different, which is kind of the whole point of the conversation, I think. But for you, Bob, having a workshop in improvisation, um, what effort would that serve in your mind, and what are some of the primary goals or targets you have when you bring people in or when people join these workshops? What are you hoping they get from the experience and grow from that point forward?
Sure. And you mentioned like how do you teach improvisation? And we do not teach improvisation. We give an opportunity for improvisation, and we do talk about sometimes some strategies that you can think about, and do a few things. We have some things that are kind of exercises that just get you kind of to think about it and to say, all right, different people are playing. What are our possibilities? What tools do we have? How can we add to the conversation? Or how can we just listen and wait for the right time to add something to the conversation? So there's a few uh, exercises that we do, but a lot of it is really just free improvisation. So the workshops are about giving the opportunity to come and play with new people, to meet people, but also to go in to have something that has low pressure, so that if somebody wants to think about, oh, I've wanted to do this, but how do you get started? You know, how do you do this? How do you get started? So the, the workshops are a really great place for that, because there is no pressure. You can do stuff, you can make a sound or not make a sound, and the spirit of kind of giving, and the spirit of the humility of this as well, of saying, okay, what do I have? What can I give? But just to make sure that um, it's an opportunity to do things without judgment. So I think that in itself is enough to have. And when you get people and you get all these musicians together, things happen,
Mhm.
and people people meet, because it's really hard to do that these days, to say, okay, how do I meet new musicians and, you know, see which ones are like-minded or not, you know? And so a lot of that has happened over the years through the workshops where, you know, bands will form and combos will form and stuff like that. So that's the main thing of what it is. It's just a way to bring things together. And I'll say one more thing about improv. The people who are good at it are very generous, right? Because you have to, when you're playing with someone, as Knox said, when you're having a conversation like this, you have to listen. You have to listen to have it to be a good conversation. You have to listen and let other people, you know, have their say and support them. And I've definitely found um, that the people that stick with this and like to do it all wind up being really nice people. So that's a great thing, to be able to deal with musicians who are generous and easy to deal with. And it's the musicians in this have just been the easiest to deal with I've ever dealt with in my life, you know. And so that's kind of, you know, what I hope people get out of the workshops is to have that opportunity, but also to see how people.
Yeah, I think those are all lovely points. It's something that I've always believed philosophically, whether it's a show or an art gallery or any kind of meeting space with artistic types. If you're in the room, if you found your way into the room, you belong in that room. You know, you're there for a reason, and you're instantly in a position where there shouldn't be intimidation. I think sometimes, depending on a musician's experience level, hearing improv jazz, you know, can be, oh, this is out of my league, or this is, you know, a highbrow expression that's not in my vocabulary. Whereas what you've structured and on the website as well, you make the point that novices and amateurs are welcome, rock players are welcome. Um, just the only limitation is, I think the phrase on the website is the only limitation is to be timid. You know, dive in, explore, meet different people. And I think that's a beautiful statement. And it leads to having this, you know, seemingly disparate collection of different musicians who make it work and other things form out of it and different experiences, different education levels, different expressions. It's kind of how else do you learn as a musician but to be in these sort of fostering environments? So I think it's fantastic. I think philosophically, it's definitely a model that um, leads to more than what I've heard from it. And what I've heard from it is fantastic. But Michael, how did you get involved in this in the mix with this up in New Haven?
Well, I had gotten into playing in Never Ending Books through just playing there with people who would ask me to play there. I've known Connor Peralt for a really long time, and he's somebody who, you know, kind of has you know, he runs the space sort of in a way, with many other people. And so since I knew him for a while, you know, I would play there, and I met Bob by going to there, and you know, eventually I started booking my own shows there as well, in addition to the series that I book in Willimantic, Connecticut at NHIC Records. So it's good that I'm able to book multiple things. You know, there are certain Willimantic is kind of far away, so the people that play at Willimantic might not play at Never Ending Books, and the people that play at Never Ending Books might not play at Willimantic.
Mhm.
So I'm able to get kind of people from New York, New Haven area, maybe Mass to come play Never Ending Books. But it's really easy to get people from like the Cambridge area, people that study at New England Conservatory. Those types of people are easy to get at Willimantic Records, being that it's much closer. So I found that I've been able to book a diversity of artists. But I basically met Bob through just being an improviser and being around. You know, there's not that many of us in the scene, so you know, it's kind of at a point where if you're an improviser in Connecticut, you probably know everybody. It's pretty tight knit, you know, and yeah.
Mike was another way that Michael came in was through Joe Morris too. So Joe is a really good kind of connector in there, because um, Joe, I think, is the first one that mentioned Michael to me, just saying how wonderful of a player he was, and just such a wonderful guy. Which
Same here. He mentioned you to me also.
Joe was right. And then we did this series at another place called the State House, Joe and I, and Michael played there early on in that with the group, and that was great. So that was another way that he kind of came in all kinds of ways. So I've met Michael. That's from the Willimantic one and from Never Ending Books, and then State House and Joe Morris. So as he said, it's a tight knit community, and if you're doing stuff and you're really serious, you're going to run into one another. And as I said, also lots of generous people in it, and so everybody wants to play.
Hmm. Michael, when and how did improv first color what you've been doing musically?
Oh, it was like anything else, What I went to a performing arts high school. It was after school, 4 days a week during high school, and I went there all 4 years. And so we're learning about music, and I'm playing drums there. And, if you're into like things under the umbrella of jazz music slash Black American creative musics, um, you know, eventually, I start listening to people like Ornette Coleman and Cecil Taylor and Albert Eiler, and I find like, oh, these are the things I really like this stuff, and it's really touching me in this way that the other stuff. I mean, I still listen to a lot of the Blue Note catalog, whether it's hard bop or post bop, different stuff. I still love a lot of that music, but in high school, I found myself getting into that. I found myself getting into noise music, some of the European improvisers, the Japanese noise music scene, different things. And I kind of was interested in that. And so that led me to kind of want to do it and learn more about it. And I ended up doing some of it with my friends in high school, of course. But then I went to university and I further studied it and played a lot and, just try to play and be part of it and just do it and try to practice my ass off. And you know but yeah, I think it was just like a general line of like being into improvised music and then finding out and more about Black American avant-garde music, like Ornette and Cecil, Albert Eiler, the AACM, Anthony Braxton, et cetera. I finding out a lot about that stuff and different labels and different scenes throughout the country and different players, and that was very inspiring to me. So I guess I was just drawn to that, being coming from like a more straight ahead background, I guess, if you want to say that.
Hmm. What I find very interesting about it, and I'm reminded a lot when I was very young, um, elementary school actually, I had a really sort of forward-thinking music teacher who was playing as Charles Ives records, as an example, or he would play no music and then just have us sit in darkness. And goes, eventually, if you pay attention, if you're going to hear a symphony, it could be the air conditioner, it can be the clicking of the clock, it can be anything. And before you realize it, you've got music in the air without even realizing it. So it kind of reminds me of that in the sense that as improvisers, because I saw your performance at Never Ending Books. Obviously, I saw Knox and Bob perform as well. And I was singing your praises a bit earlier before we logged on. I was really impressed by that performance you gave that evening. Um, as much if you're a listener to improvisational music, you have to listen very carefully, like listening to a Charles Ives record. You kind of have to listen a bit more carefully. So I'd imagine playing it, you've got to listen to it too. So I open this question for all of you. Kind of walk me through that intuition that takes place where you're sitting in the never-ending books, okay, we're going, and then lift off, and then 45 minutes later, it's over. But within those 45 minutes, what's some of that communication that you're bringing to this conversation, as far as who's leading, where does it go, signals, vibe, things like that? I know it's probably a difficult question to maybe answer because everything's a bit different every time you do it, but maybe you can see where I'm going with this. Where are there some fundamental things that you're looking for or listening for in those environments?
I'll start off. I think there's a lot of different ways of approaching it, but in its best way, you're not really, the communication's just happening. You're not saying, what am I going to do next? You're just doing it. And when people are doing that, you're listening, but you're not thinking about listening. That's just all the preparation that you've done, all the practice and all the things that you've done is so that it's just natural. It's like, I'll go back to Knox's point about a conversation, and it can be an argument, it can be, a heated conversation, it can be a lot of different ways of communicating with one another, but you don't think about it while you're doing it. So it's just natural. And when it's the best, you get people together and you just play. There's other ways that strategies for improv that we do off of scores. There's sometimes graphic scores, sometimes little pieces of written music. I mentioned conduction before, so you can have someone conducting things. So there's all kinds of different ways and strategies that people bring. So, but for me, the purest form, it just happens.
Either of you guys have anything to add on that?
Uh, yeah, you go, Knox.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I think sometimes if a listen someone who's listening to it might at times might think that everybody's sort of talking over themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It could be very busy. Each person can be very, very busy. Um, and part of that for me when it's working and that doesn't always work doesn't mean it's every time we improvise it's what I would necessarily call a great piece of music, but it's even when it's not working, that's important because there's something you always learn from it. I look at it like this: let's say you're in a room and you're with like four different people, and you're doing some free improvisation. Um, it, for me, I always think about conceptually what is my role in the moment that this is happening. So my roles are going to shift during the course of the as you said 45 minutes before. Um, it's going to shift, but it the conversation, it goes beyond the conversation to more of like how am I'm not listening necessarily to the details, but I'm listening more to how is these other people in there, how are they, and I try to apply concepts to them, my thinking of like how am I going to interact with them? How am I connecting or disconnecting? Because it could be that too, where I can somehow be part of the whole is shaping it as music. So quite often might mean, oh, I just need to step out, and maybe that becomes like a duet with somebody, or maybe that becomes a solo, or maybe I have to strategically, what my role might be. I have to strategically pull out every so often during the course to give the whole thing some shape. I mean, I don't know if anybody else does. We don't really talk about it because when it's good, you don't have to talk about it. But it's more of I think we each come with our knowledge of how we play, where we've learned to play, what music is for us. Because that's the big question: what is music? Um, and here we are trying to do it on the fly, but somehow, you know, shape it into something, you know. And like with I play with both Michael and Bob, and both these guys I think have a very different approach to their shaping.
Mm.
So the challenge for me and the fun for me is, okay, well, how am I going to connect in the moment with these people and what they're spontaneously giving me, and what's my reaction, and then what are my actions? Um, so it never really feels like anybody's leading it, even though at times some of us might back off and let someone, go visit a planet or something. But I mean, but it's a wonderful way to communicate, because every time you do it, even when if it's not great, you feel like you've definitely been taken somewhere and you've worked at something that you've bringing your history to,
Hmm.
and sometimes I'll say, oh Jesus, I just felt right on my face, but then somebody covers for me, whether they know it or not. That always seems to happen. So it's after doing decades of playing with bands on stage, doing those pop rock songs or whatever, you know the, there are always those train wrecks, as we call them, where everybody kind of falls on their face, you know, and it's really interesting because quite often when that happened, I'd be go, oh my God, this is amazing, and then we get screamed at on the bus after the show, Um, but here's an opportunity where you can be completely human, you know, where you are encouraged to fall on your face. Because quite often when you do, that means you've taken a risk, you're going out on a limb, and something magical can happen from that.
Mm.
Well, instead of it all being like charted out and we're just following, a certain amount of time scripted, you know. And the other thing is this is a great way to play with time. I mean, if you it's really interesting because quite often, some of these shows they last for like 45 minutes. Everybody seems to know when 45 minutes up and we all seem to stop. But Bob and I have a band called the Tricycle Trick, and we did show like a week or so ago, and I think it was after maybe about 10 minutes we stopped. It just happened. It was just that magic, and it's like, whoa, okay, so we'll do another piece of music. Um, I think when it's really good, it's not it goes beyond us.
Mm.
The power of it is much greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, I can start saying if something spiritual happens, where there's something that's much greater than any one of us could do on our own, or even acknowledge that we have the power to do that as a group. There's when you free yourself up and you become that vulnerable, I
Mm.
think I think you allow some power to come into it, which actually creates what I call music.
Absolutely. Michael, what are your thoughts on that?
Depends on who I'm playing with, but a lot of people that I'm comfortable with playing with, we're able to have our own streams of material that sometimes interact with each other. Sometimes in some improvised music settings, a lot of people will just bring their material, start making sounds, improvising off of their own sounds and creating their own streams. Sometimes these streams collide, and sometimes when they collide, maybe you end the piece, maybe it gets louder for a second, maybe it goes here or there. But I think when it comes to improvisation, a lot of people think about it in terms of a call and response sense where, you say something, then I say something, then you say. But really, a lot of improvised music that I really enjoy and a lot of it that I really play, a lot of people are playing stuff all at the same time and kind of having their own streams. And it depends on things, whether it's aspects of the melodic aspect of it or the timbral aspect of it or the density aspect of it, that everyone can have these own kind of aspects applied to their own stream, and sometimes they collide, sometimes they change. In improvised music, I find it very important to have a good sense of being able to play material on your own and generate your own material. Um, I think that's the best stuff. I think it takes a lot of practice, at least for me personally, a lot of practice to maintain what I would consider my default material that I bring to the table. And then if everybody improvising has really strong default material, and is aware that in improvisation that people can be playing over each other, that is when, in my opinion, the really good music happens. And inside of, let's say there's four voices happening, maybe one interacts with the other in a way of juxtaposition, or maybe one starts playing the same thing as the other voice, or maybe one voice starts playing a certain tempo, or one voice might start playing in a tempo that's kind of broken up. These are all things that we can do and all different. I think it's important to listen to the music a lot and to listen to all parts of it. I find the best people I play with are aware of different movements within the music, not only different movements, but different scenes and different players. You know, um, like Derek Bailey and Sonny Sharrock are two great guitarists, but they play totally different from each other, and they were involved in different things, but they're both very important to the music, and you should listen to both of them. Just like you should also listen to Albert Eiler and Evan Parker. You should listen to, you should listen to Rashid Ali and Andrew Cyrille. You should be thinking about all these different musicians who might play the same instruments, but they might approach them differently. And I think that will also help you figure out your own solo stream that you can bring to the table, by listening to a lot of this music and absorbing a lot of it and being like, oh, well, this person kind of plays like this, and this person kind of plays like, and in this situation, maybe since he played like this kind of happened, and we can make our own inferences that we can bring to the improvisation table by listening to the music and respecting its history. And I think that's a big part of it. A lot of people that are studying the music and coming to it kind of green sometimes, I think they might need to listen to more of the music, and that's fine. I mean, there's plenty of things that I haven't listened to, and I have a never ending music backlog, but I think that is deeply important to the music. Being able to create your own stream, knowing how these streams can interact, knowing that it's not just a call and response thing, just like, those things are very important. Having a good grip on your own default material that you bring to the table, good sensibilities of timbral and melodic things, and things that you could bring to the table and how other people might play. Those are very important things to me. I hope that's kind of a weird long answer. And I'm not saying that we should compare these musicians to each other and be like, this one is better than this one. That's not what I mean by it. I simply mean that all these musicians are so incredible, but they all play totally differently. I mean, just thinking about drummers alone, I mean, Sonny Murray plays different from Rashid Ali, and Rashid Ali plays different from Andrew Cyrille. Andrew Cyrille plays different from Paul Litton, who plays different from, so there's tons of drummers, tons of musicians. I think, in order to be a good improviser, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of studying and listening. And, yeah, I just think strengthening your own default material and having that to bring to the table and being able to analyze all this music and really think about it, all of that stuff is deeply important. So that's what I mean about all that.
Going into the recording side of things, I know, Bob, you have a couple of labels where you're working to document this stuff. I know fairly recently, I think you and Michael did a recording called Purity, which is on CD as well as digital. Tell me a little bit about these labels, Bob, and how that plays into the greater picture of what you're doing.
Well, so I have two labels. One is NHIC, New Haven Improvisers Collective, NHIC Records, NHIC Records. And that one I started, 2008, just a few years after the collective started. Say, all right, let's document what the people in the collective are doing. We were recording, we were able to play at Firehouse, this beautiful place, once a year. So we would do a show and do a recording there, form a group with. So that was kind of what that was for. And there's now 20 CDs, it's 17 years, so it's like 1 year or so um, that we've done. So I have that, and that still goes, and we still play at Firehouse 12, and I have a couple that are coming out on that label from our last recording there. But last year, I decided, or a couple of years ago, whenever I started this other record label, it was like, there are so many good people playing around, and I'd love to play with them, and I'd love to document just in a very small way. So this is all duos, almost all duos. The first record was a trio, and all recorded, right here in my room. So trying to do a really nice job at recording people and just getting all of the great people around here, because a lot of them aren't really anywhere, and some of them are just incredibly, just fabulous players. So that was kind of the gist of what I was doing. And Michael was one of the early records that I did, just because I feel like, oh, and the rest of the bookers, they're a force, and they're really great here in New Haven, and they bring their own aesthetic, and they work tirelessly on this music. and it's amazing. And I've been going to their shows now since they really started doing it regularly here at the bookstore, and just watching the progression of what they're doing. You know, they were great when they started, and just where they're going, and to see all this stuff has been great. Um, so I asked Michael if he'd come over and play a little bit, and we record it, and we did, and I think it came out great. And Michael played wonderfully, and he agreed to play with me, which is always nice and generous. And so that's kind of what that record label's about. But because it's kind of on a smaller scale, and I don't do huge promotion. I'll send out a press release. They got this music; it just has to be out there. So I've got 6 or 7 so far, and I got a couple, in the queue that are ready to go. The last one was with a Chapman stick player, Brett Bottomley, who's in the area. Who's just a fabulous, fabulous player. I was very happy to get him to do. I did one with Caleb, which was a super high energy one, and just a lot of them still going, and that's what that one's all
Fantastic. I know a couple of you have some firm commitments later this evening, so I don't want to keep you too long. But I did want to give an opportunity to spotlight individually things you're working on. I know Knox, you've kind of been everywhere lately. I just heard you on the radio not too long ago doing an interview, and you recently did a solo recording album/book called The Sound, which we did a podcast on. You also did a wonderful album earlier this year with Bobby Previtt. We've talked about that. So I'll make sure those are linked in this video description as well. But what do the next couple months look like for you all individually? I'll start with Knox.
Got a bunch of stuff in New York in September. I'm working with Reese Chatham,
Ooh.
playing at the Pace Gallery, and then I'm working with Chris Cochran out in Brooklyn on the 20th, some gig, and it's busy. And I've also been, um, working on other projects that aren't improvisatory projects. And I actually do have to go, but I just wanted to on the heels of what Michael was saying, which I thought was really brilliant, is is that and part of what I really love about this community is Michael was talking about finding your own stream. I used the word autonomy, and I'm always trying to steal things, hear things, and the point being is that I'm never going to sound like Derek Bailey. I'm never going to sound like Sonny Chirac. But I take these things, and it's been great because there's one of my favorite guitar players around these days is Luke, who's a fantastic guitar player. Luke Ravinsky plays with Michael and Caleb, and I go and I really pay attention to what he's doing. Michael and I did a gig what was about a week or so ago, and I absolutely stole one of Luke's things. You never know it because I could never play like Luke, but things like that. I'm always by playing with these people. Even Bob and some of the other guys in the workshop. You're always hearing things that you just don't really hear before, and I go, okay, I'll put that into my arsenal and I'll make it mine. And of course, no one's ever going to say, you sound like Bob Gorry, but I might, I might, think I do. But I think that's part of finding this, building your autonomy. Like, Michael mentioned, do a lot of listening to different people, which I've done my whole career, but also listening to the people you're playing with. 'Cause I'm always grabbing very cool stuff from them, and especially in this area. It's wonderful. But I
Excellent.
actually got to take off. So
I'll see you soon, my friend.
I just dropped that bomb.
Take care. I'll talk to you
I,
soon.
I love these guys. They're absolutely fantastic people and musicians.
Have a good night, Knox.
Right, take care.
See ya.
Great. So, Bob, what did the next few months look like for you?
Well, let's see. So I do have some records coming out. Uh, Michael mentioned Connor Peralt. I have a new record coming out with Connor, um, Diane Bittner, who is wonderful bass clarinetist, and Michael Palucci. It's a group called Roundhouse Quartet, and so we have, and this is recorded at Firehouse 12. So this will be on NHIC Records. So that should come out in another, let's see, early October. We do have a couple of shows coming up that we're finalizing the dates for, but we're definitely going to be doing them. Cafe 9, which is a great venue here in New Haven. We're going to do kind of a celebration of the 20th year and have some groups on that. And then the Firehouse will be in early December. We'll be back there, and I think we'll be doing a conduction to mark the 20th anniversary of the first conduction. So I'm putting together the group that can do that conduction, and we'll have one other group on that, which is going to be very special, but I'm not going to announce that quite yet. And yeah, and then we also have a series. I mean, there's always music that's happening, and at the bookstore, Michael does a bunch of stuff that he'll talk about. Caleb Duval and Luke Levinsky and FIM, they have their series that they do, and I also do a series at the bookstore on the second Thursday of every month through the fall. So there'll be a bunch of shows there. First one being on the 11th of September. I'll be playing with Brett Bottomley, and we'll have a couple of other groups on that. So just keep playing. That's what I'm doing for the.
Excellent, excellent. And Michael, how about yourself?
Friday, September 12th at Never Ending Books. I'm booking a show. I'm bringing 3 quartets. I'm playing in all of them. It's myself with bookers, my friends Caleb Duvall, Luke Ravinsky, and we're playing quartet with John Elbaz. So myself, Caleb Duvall, Luke Ravinsky, and John Elbaz on keyboards. Also, another group on that one is Jonathan Milberger and Kaylin Gandhi on saxes and Tete Leguia on bass. I'll be playing drums in that. And then also, I'll be playing with Connor Peralt, who I mentioned earlier, in a quartet that night with myself, Connor Peralt, Kelly Bray, and Adam Matlock. Other than that, there is a Willimantic Records show on Saturday, the 27th, Willimantic Records CT at 2 p.m. Music starts. Those are always a matinee. There's a lot of people playing on that. Still getting that sorted out. I have a record label called Guardrail Recordings. You know, like the guardrails that are on like the side of the highway so you don't fly off the road. That's what it's named after. So Guardrail Recordings. I have a bunch of stuff on there. I just put out a solo record. I think I put it out in May. It's my newest solo record. It's a double CD. I would argue that it's a good record, and if you want to hear solo drums for 2 CDs straight, with some decent variety, I would check out that record. It's called Physical on Guardrail Recordings, and that's already out. That's available digitally and also for order on CD if you want me to send you a copy. Trying to think about what else I'm doing. I just recorded a new Booker's record. I have a recording coming up soon. I'll be recording soon in a quartet that I've been playing with, and that quartet I'll be recording with is James McCain on sax, Hilliard Green and Evan Palmer on basses, and myself on the drums. That's all the stuff that I got coming up in the future, but you know, the recordings are still in progress. The one of them hasn't even happened yet, but that's what I got going on in my life. Friday, September 12th at Never Ending Books. Saturday, September 27th at Willimantic Records. That one's at 2 p.m. And Guardrail Recordings. My solo album Physical is on there, as well as many other recordings with great improvisers. That's what I would say.
Excellent. Is there a dedicated website where people can find you?
I post everything on my Instagram. I know that's very like, but I do post everything on my Instagram. I make posters for all the events. I try to share them and tag everybody in them. You'll see them floating around Instagram. But if you want to follow me on Instagram, Michael Larocca, you'll see I got all the posters on there. It's a public account. So I would just say follow me on there, and you'll be able to see everything I post and all the happenings. You know what I mean?
Excellent, excellent. Well, I will include a ton of links in the video description so the viewer can check out these various things, and I would encourage them to do so. Whether or not they're in Connecticut, what's beautiful about this is thanks to Bob, there are records documenting some of these combinations of people who come along the way. So this music's going to live for people who can't physically be in New Haven, which I think is beautiful as well. So there'll be plenty of things for people to check out. I'm definitely going to come back. I want to hit a couple workshops and, maybe get some playing in myself down there because I think it was a really inspiring scene you've got going on. I'd, love to be more a part of it moving forward.
Always welcome.
Thanks
Fantastic.
for having us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you both very much. Like I said, I'll be happy to promote things in the video description, and I'm sure our paths will cross again soon.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you very much, guys.